Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to another bright and sunny day here at Albert Park. We're in Melbourne for round one of the 2026 Formula One World Championship, with just one more practice session to go before the first qualifying of the year. This is the last chance then for teams to make their final tweaks and get their energy management balance correct, with some having a lot more work to do than others. My name's Harry Benjamin. I'm up in the commentary box keeping an eye on things, but let's check in, shall we, with our eyes and ears on the ground. Jenny Gow. Morning, Jen.
Good morning. Yes, I've come down from my lofty perch above the pit lane, and I'm now in the pit lane for those who joined us yesterday morning. Hope everyone's doing well. Congratulations and well done if you are awake in the UK and listening to this. You can hear the crowd cheering for Oscar Piastri, who went fastest yesterday in FP2, and the crowd certainly are on form. Came in on the bus this morning with loads of Oscar Piastri fans. They are certainly cheering him on. No Australian has ever won the Australian Grand Prix, so it's going to be a push, but this is a man who is on a mission, Harry.
Yeah, it certainly is. Still a long way to go, but the Melbourne-born Piastri in good form yesterday. But we're not actually going to see any action in FP3 yet because it has been delayed. We are presuming that is because of some barrier repairs going on the circuit. That's around turn 5, where there was a fairly big shunt in Formula 3. Their first sprint race of the season. The two of the Prema drivers involved in that one. So they are still repairing that barrier, and once we get the all clear from the FIA and the marshals, we can get FP3 going. But there's still a fair bit to chat about until then here at Albert Park, where there are some overcast skies over the lake surrounding the park. But as we look out of the commentary box on the start-finish straight, lots of blue sky interrupting those white wispy clouds too. And well, temperature about 20.3 degrees, track temperature 34.2 degrees. And up in the commentary box with myself is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson. First of all, Mark, I suppose first bit of track action we saw yesterday, some reflections from that and your biggest takeaways?
I thought it was interesting because, of course, all we've seen so far is cars in testing where we don't have any real idea what their program is, what they're running, what they're trying to figure out. Yesterday was the first time they all got together in a competitive sense, and we started to get a little bit of a picture, a window into the performance order of these teams. And I think one of the things that we can probably say is that it looks like at the end of the two practice sessions, the top 4 teams from last year still look like the top 4 teams, but it is very close. Mercedes, they got really good long run pace, but then the short runs, and what's really going to be impactful when it comes to qualifying later on today is Ferrari looked incredibly close. Can never rule out Max Verstappen, and Mercedes are up there too. And then of course McLaren, with that Mercedes power unit, also jumped right into the mix at the end of FP2 as well. So it's incredibly close to call, which is exactly how we want it to be going into a new season.
Absolutely. Those top 4 teams, it looks like a tight fight with the likes of Mercedes, Ferrari, you throw McLaren and Red Bull in there as well. But I think some teams still haven't quite turned up the wick just yet. But there's an awful lot of changes to get our heads round for this year in Formula One. The main thing surrounding, well, the new cars and the engine management. And, well, there's a lot on team principals to discuss. Let's head down to Jenny Gow.
Yes, I'm with Andrea Stella, the team principal of McLaren. Session delayed, that can't be ideal for you guys.
Well, you know, like it's ideal or not ideal. If the session is delayed, it's for reasons that are necessary. So we let the race direction and the circuit do the job that is required. P3 normally is not a session in which you are necessarily and only time starving. You want to fine-tune things for qualifying. So I think if it's only a 10 minutes delay, we'll be okay.
And just a quick answer about the straight line mode that's been implemented and then rescinded. What's your feeling about that, please?
I think it's important that the FIA take input on board, because we want to obviously consider all the factors. In this case, it looks like the reaction might have been a little bit on the overreaction side, but after reassessment we are back to where we were yesterday, which is a position that we support.
Thank you so much for your time.
Jenny speaking with team principal of McLaren, Andrea Stella, and yes, as I was about to explain, there are lots of changes and new terminology to get to grips with for this year. The cars being smaller, the engines being a near split between internal combustion and electric power. We also have active aero as well, where we see the front wing and the rear wing opening and closing. We have straight line mode, where the wings open when, well, you're within a straight line, and there are designated zones around every track that we'll go to. They're outlined by the FIA ahead of schedule. And for Albert Park, well, the zones at the start of the weekend were the main straight down towards turn 1, then again down towards turn 3, from turn 5 to turn 6, and then all the way down Lakeside Drive from turn 6 all the way through to turn 9, then again out of turn 10 to 11. Now, ahead of free practice 3, we were told by the FIA that straight line mode had been removed after driver concerns from that stretch heading down Lakeside Drive between turn 6 all the way towards turn 9 for safety concerns and that huge reduction of drag causing a lot of sliding for the cars. Andrew, that seems to have been rescinded now, and they've done a bit of a last-minute U-turn. What more can you tell us?
Well, it's been quite the morning, Harry. It really has. Nicholas Tombazis, the FIA single-seater director, head of F1 effectively, announced this change to the media at 10:30 this morning. He announced it to the teams about 45 minutes or so before that. It became very, and he was saying it was 7 teams were in favour of this decision, 4 teams were against it. The drivers were concerned about safety through that mode. He was saying that the downforce reduction for the straight line mode had been more than they expected, and the drivers were worried about crashing essentially. But as the sort of members of the media who bothered to find out what's going on behind the scenes, and I'm one of them, started to do our work, it became apparent that wasn't true. Nearly all the teams were against it. Not all, but nearly all. Some of them, none of them were for it. Some of them were a bit sort of more ambivalent. It was also not true that the drivers had expressed serious safety concerns. Gabriel Bortoleto, who's the Audi driver, one of the 2 Audi drivers, he had mentioned that if it was, he got passed by Charles Leclerc's Ferrari apparently in second practice, and he said in the drivers' meeting that had it been wet, he would have felt I might not have made it through the corner. They're these sort of kinks in a straight, basically. But of course, it's not wet, Harry, is it? It's glorious sunshine in Melbourne at the moment. So it seems that Nicholas Tombazis has panicked, and so the teams all sort of piled on, basically, and there was lots of meetings, and I've spoken to many of the team principals in the last sort of hour or so, and they were all like really quite angry about this. So they've all piled on Nicholas Tombazis, and he's done a U-turn essentially. They've said that they'll review it after P3, but I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if anything changed again. And someone described this to me as a rubbish show, but they didn't use the word rubbish.
Doesn't take a brain surgeon to work out what that word might have been. But I suppose the other thing about, if it's wet, I'm pretty sure straight line mode is you're not allowed to use it.
They have the facility to stop people using it either completely or partially. Exactly. Yeah. So, but it's not wet even.
Yeah.
But,
so we've not even crossed that bridge yet. So I mean, if you're still getting to grips with all this terminology, so there's clearly a lot of back and forth going on between the FIA and the teams here. It looks like the teams have won out on this occasion, but straight line mode with the front wing and the rear wing both open, reduces drag, it deactivates on braking, or there are also distance markers as well which cover it, but it reduces the drag and the downforce to get higher straight line speed, so faster top speeds. That helps things like energy management and makes overtaking and defending a bit more possible as well. Then you have corner mode where they close up, and ironically that's how they operate through the corners. Higher downforce allows the cars to stick down more, helping them to turn and stop essentially.
Yeah, so the reason why the teams were so up in arms about this fundamentally as a body, not, as I said, not everybody completely up in arms, but is that it sounds like a relatively insignificant change, right? It just means you've got a bit less downforce on the car, but actually it affects virtually every parameter of the car. The first thing is energy recovery. The whole point of the straight line mode is that you're going faster down the straight, so when you slow down for the corners, you've got to slow down more, and therefore you can recover more energy. But even with that straight line mode, these cars are still energy starved, and this is one of the most energy starved circuits. So there was a big problem on that front. Beyond that, if you're running the car with more downforce on it, you've got to change your ride height. That changes your suspension settings. and it changes your aerodynamic settings. Everything was basically a clean sheet of paper. One of the team principals, I'll just name him, it was James Vowles of Williams, said we're just guessing the setup at the moment because we've got no information to go on, because we've all done our simulations to come here weeks in advance, in the simulator and all the rest of it, and we've come up with the best guess that we could. And even then, some of the teams yesterday were saying that we haven't got the energy recovery mode right, we have to change everything. Now we've got to start all over again with no information. So you can see why there was such uproar about it.
It certainly is. If you are just joining us here, we're filling, but we're telling you important information. There's no action on the track right now. FP3 has been delayed. That is because of barrier repairs going on at turn 5 after a big crash in the Formula 3 race a little earlier. And there's still quite extensive barrier repairs going on. At the moment, the estimated time of the session restarting is 12:45 local. So that's in about 10 minutes' time. But I wouldn't be surprised if that gets delayed a little more. So not an ideal set of circumstances, Mark, to kickstart qualifying day, because there is an awful lot of information to be gathered still ahead of what could be, well, to kind of go, Andrew, it's a step into the unknown to go qualifying.
Yeah, it really is, and I think these practice sessions are so valuable, more than ever before right now, because everything's so new. And to put a little bit of context around what we're just talking, you're going to hear the words sort of energy management and harvesting and deployment a lot more this year because of the way that these new cars are constructed, how the power is delivered. As you said, Harry, it's about a 50-50 split now between the electric motor and battery and the internal combustion engine. There's a huge amount of strategy behind how you harvest that energy, where you do it, because you've got a battery now that is going to be completely almost emptied and refilled a couple of times during the course of a single lap. And because that battery and electric motor is delivering around about half of your car's power, around about 470 horsepower, which is about half of what you've got available to you, you need to get right on top of that and have it optimized at all times when the car's on track. You can imagine a scenario, if you get that wrong and you end up with a considerable amount less energy available from your battery and electric motor when another car perhaps has that available to them. That's a car that's twice as powerful as the one that lost the electric side. So we want to avoid those kind of situations. So the teams need the time on track to strategize around how they're going to harvest that energy at the end of straights, in the corners. You're going to hear people talking about still remaining on throttle towards the end of straights, but also harvesting at the same time, almost using the internal combustion engine as a generator to generate energy to put back into the battery, because that becomes such an important factor now. You don't want to be left without the electric side of the way this power is delivered in a car. So there's a huge amount of learning, a number of complex systems that manage and run all of this stuff, a lot of which the drivers now have to be on top of and control from inside the cars themselves. The teams have got a lot of work to do in planning all of that, a lot of simulations, but the time on track is absolutely critical. So as you heard Andrea Stella say there, yeah, they can cope with a sort of 10 or 15 minute loss there because it's the same for everybody at the end of the day, but they really would love to have more cars on track to get more learning done. Yeah,
well, a lot of hubbub in the paddock, very busy while we wait for FP3 to get going. Grandstands are packed out here in Albert Park as everyone's desperate to see these cars take back to the track. What's happening in the pit lane, Jenny?
Well, every 10 minutes they need to recycle these cars and get the power going. So right now at Williams they're going through a power cycle. Alex Albon just arms crossed at the back of the garage, just walking alongside his car, looking a little bit bored with his arms crossed and his outfit just around his midriff with the fireproof vest on. And then on the other side, Carlos Sainz has his big headphones on rather than the little ones that they wear inside their ears. He looks so skinny actually, they're wafer thin, these athletes and drivers. And he's just talking to a performance engineer and his race engineer, and he looks rather chipper. They all have a bit of fun in these delays, but they have to switch it on so quickly as well, so they're very focused. I did ask, can we speak to Alex at all? But it was a no. But they're going through their power cycle, and they'll just kill some time like we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Good try there, Jenny. Keep trying. Thank you for that. We just got some images of Franco Colapinto in the Alpine. He got himself into a bit of trouble yesterday, going very slowly on the start-finish straight, and Lewis Hamilton nearly colliding into the back of the Alpine driver, but no penalties or warnings or reprimands given to Colapinto. A false neutral had developed itself within that Alpine car, and the team were telling him to stay on the left-hand side on that racing line, because if you kept going down the main straight, one of the exit roads is off onto the side there, and it might well have been more dangerous to pull over to the right. So Alpine have got away with that one. Let's have a chat then about sort of where we think the pack is stacking up right now after 2 practice sessions yesterday. And we had the return of long run corner, Andrew, which was very exciting, and it looked like George Russell and Mercedes, as we were expecting, to be strong, but then we have to adjust for things like fuel loads and all this kind of stuff. It still looks incredibly tight at the front, but not just Mercedes, but I think McLaren are right there.
I'm not sure about that. So I saw George Russell briefly yesterday afternoon after practice, and I said it looked like you were pretty strong on the long run. I said about a second faster than anyone else, and he said we had it at about 6/10. So that's quite a big gap. Then Charles Leclerc did his TV interview yesterday after the session. Ferrari were quite optimistic after pre-season testing. Charles Leclerc sounded quite downbeat. He was basically saying we didn't think Mercedes would be this far ahead. I thought McLaren looked pretty good, but they were on the soft tyre, whereas Mercedes were on the hard tyre, so that would have given them an advantage, especially on the relatively short run that the McLaren drivers did. And I think Lando Norris had a difficult day yesterday because he lost a lot of time in the first session to a gearbox issue. I was speaking to another of the team principals, not James Vowles this time. He said that I told him about what Leclerc had said, and he said, well, I'm not surprised, because we had Ferrari as the 4th fastest team after pre-season testing, with Mercedes ahead, and then McLaren and Red Bull quite close to each other, and then Ferrari behind that. One of the teams that was most disappointed yesterday in their performance was Alpine, who looked like they were top of the midfield after the pre-season testing, but they were towards the back of the midfield yesterday. But they reckon they just got their energy. I suppose to Steve Nielsen, their team principal. I ticked off quite a few boxes this morning.
You've absolutely been nailing it, Benson.
He was saying they got their energy deployment strategy wrong yesterday, and they think they'll be in a better place today. Audi looked pretty good in terms of midfield runners, and Williams are sort of quietly pleased that Aston Martin are in so much trouble, because they're in a lot of trouble as well.
Yes, the spotlight is actually a bit shifted away from teams like Williams. But one person, we just heard a huge roar of applause there from one of the grandstands. They caught a glimpse of Oscar Piastri, who was just making his way from the paddock through to the garage. Estimated time of the session start being delayed further, I'm afraid, 12:50 local time as well. So still struggling with the barrier repairs. Down at turn 5, the fast right-hander, that's due to a crash from 2 Formula 3 cars in their sprint race earlier on today, so that has had a direct impact, unfortunately, on this final practice session. Talking of that mid-pack, Arvid Lindblad and Racing Bulls looking very good. He was in the top 8 in both sessions, quietly going about his business, Mark.
Yeah, I thought he did a really solid job, actually. You know, there's a lot of pressure coming in particularly as a sole rookie. Last year we had about 6 rookies, didn't we, at the Australian Grand Prix? So I guess, you know, every one of them was surrounded by other people going through the same experience. He's on his own here. He did a really solid first day, and that's what you have to do. You've got to build with your performance gradually. It builds your confidence as you go through it, and you can keep stepping up as the sessions come through the weekend. It's when you have an incident, if you go off in practice, it dents your confidence. You start to sort of struggle in that regard as to get into the car the next time around, and it has this knock-on negative spiral effect. So he's been really good, I think. Nothing setting the world alight yet, but really solid, you know, in terms of dependable, and I think that will be gradually building his confidence as he goes. So can't ask too much more from him, I don't think, at this stage.
He was very impressive, Harry, actually. He was quicker than Liam Lawson, his teammate, no question, yesterday. It's only Friday, of course. We don't know whether that will continue to be the case today. But for a first time out in a Grand Prix session, very, 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 very good day.
And I think one of the other things to say is, you know, Andrew just mentioned there's a couple of teams that are either happy or a little bit less happy based on what happened yesterday. Alpine maybe getting things like their energy management, their deployment slightly wrong with that strategy. I think that's going to be a feature of particularly this weekend, but maybe the early part of the season. A small mistake, and when I say the word mistake, I mean just not quite optimising the way this whole new package works, could actually shift you within that pecking order of the grid by a number of places, just by getting things right, or effectively making less mistakes. And that's really going to be the order of this weekend. Can you get through as a team cleanly through this weekend, operationally really quite good, I think that's going to deliver more opportunity than maximising your outright potential performance at this early stage.
Yeah, lots to look out for. Jenny Gow, let's head back down to you.
Yes, good news is the safety car has just gone through the pit lane. I think probably on the way out. Hard for me to see at this point in time, and I'm not allowed to step too much closer to where I am. But that could signify that the session is going to start as the FIA was estimating in the next few minutes. Certainly drivers are now in their cars and just in front of Nico Hülkenberg's Audi. I like the paintwork on the Audi, by the way. It's like silver with a touch of red and a bit of black. Are we at the point where we can talk about bodywork this year and who likes the designs of which car and how pretty they are?
Well, I mean,
are we not quite there yet?
No, we could be there. I was in two minds about the Audi livery when I first saw it. Didn't like it, and it's really grown on me. The one thing that really caught a lot of people's eye, I think, was their side pod design that drastically changed from the Barcelona shakedown to almost the kind of zero side pod we saw with Mercedes back in the first attempt of the ground effect era when they rocked up into Bahrain. But I suppose it's a good point that Andrew picked up on it as well. As it looks like, by the way, the barrier repairs are nearly done. Just a couple of last checks and sweeps on the road by the marshals there. So good work from them. So hopefully we will be able to get that 12:50 local start time and stick to it. But still some marshals out on track dealing with that barrier repair. But Audi again, another team that it looked like they're in that midfield. Huge undertaking. They take the old Sauber team over. They're still operating out of the base that Sauber has in Switzerland, but building their own engine in Neuburg. I suppose that's what these regulations were designed for, is to encourage big brands like Audi to enter the pinnacle of motorsport.
Yeah, and on that regard, it's been successful. Ford as well, of course, coming in as a partner on the engine side with the Red Bull organisation. So look, these things have worked in that sense. They've brought in major manufacturers. This is about, it's not just the sustainability from an environmental sense, but the sustainability of this sport into the future. You need big operators to come in and commit the huge sums of money that the sport takes to provide the longevity into the future. We need to make sure this sport has a solid foundation to continue building for many years to come. So that side of it's worked. I think in terms of, first of all, Audi have done a great job, but I think what you're going to see over this early part of the season is massive improvements in development. It's going to be a development race, so things like the dramatic changes in sideboard design at Audi, I think you're going to see stuff like that happening throughout the early part of this year as people just get to grips with how you optimise these cars. There's so much talk around energy management, but let's not forget there's still all the regular stuff about learning how to cope with tyres, how to optimise your aerodynamics, how to get the chassis design and balance correct. So all of those things, the normal things, are all still happening in the background. It's just that a lot of the talk's going to be about energy management and systems in the beginning.
Yeah, well, you can never get away from the tyre talk, can you, as George Russell slowly gears up and gets ready to head into the car. Puts a band round his head. It's not really, it's a bit too small to be a sweatband. Is that just to hold the hair just above the line where the bandana and the balaclava then goes on top of him?
I think George is quite serious about his haircut and how it looks when he gets out of the car. So.
Doesn't want helmet hair, basically.
Exactly.
It's a helmet hair prevention technique from George Russell going on as he
an
suits
engineer,
up.
I'd be going, how much is that band?
Yeah.
Just about your hair. We don't care about your hair.
They've lowered the weight limit, George. Come on. Everyone's struggling. We need everything we can get. I mean, talk of tyres, they are narrower tyres for this year, providing less grip. Same size in terms of the 18-inch rims, but the front tyre width has been reduced by about 25 millimetres, narrower, the rear tyre width narrower by about 30 millimetres, and that is a thing you almost kind of forget because they've got so much to think about when it comes to active air and the energy management. You think, oh no, we've still got four wheels on the car, we've got to talk about how we get these tyres to the end. Are we one stopping, are we two stopping? That's a whole other data minefield that they're going to have to think about too.
And if you go back just 12 months to the beginning of last season, that would have been the majority of a team's focus, is to understand how your car behaves on these tyres and how you can optimise its performance. That's some way down the order of priority things that teams are having to look at the moment because everything else is so prominent and new. So tyres will still be a feature. The way these cars behave, things like harvesting and energy deployment, actually have an impact on tyre behaviour as well. So much power when you hit the throttle because of the electric deployment. Anyone who's driven an electric car on the roads knows about the instant torque. It's very easy to spin up the rear tyres coming out of a corner. You have to balance and be a little bit patient on the throttle. That's a new thing, certainly to this level with the driver. So that can really affect how your tyres behave. So, you're right. There's so much to learn. so many different levels of learning to be done. This is a huge undertaking. Let's not forget, massive congratulations as the first cars roll out of the garage. Congratulations to everybody who's managed to get these cars into existence, get them down here to Australia, and at least 20 out of the 22 we think are going to compete in a race on Sunday.
Yes, Aston Martin with a huge uphill climb on their hands as the Alpine of Franco Colapinto goes to the end of the pit lane. And Jenny, well, I think we're going to meet our 12:50 restart time.
Exactly, good news. And I'm just watching Sergio Perez in the Cadillac. He's taking to the track right now on the yellow banded Pirelli tyres. And on the other side of the garage, not as good for Valtteri Bottas. He is now in his race overalls and ready to go in with his helmet on. However, it's a slightly slower start, so they're probably appreciative of this delay because they've been able to tweak that car and work on it right up until this moment. So hopefully he'll be out in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, tough day for Cadillac yesterday. Got some running, but especially in FP2, not as much as Sergio Perez would be wanting in the second Cadillac. He had a sensor issue that confined him to the garage for the majority of the start of the session, and then when he got out, well, had to swiftly pull over on the side of the road after a lap and a half with a suspected hydraulics leak. So small issues preventing Cadillac from getting the running they would like, but it does look like they will be ahead of Aston Martin, who are really struggling with that Honda engine and the vibrations it delivers on the chassis, making it incredibly tricky for the batteries to survive in that car, and indeed for the drivers to be able to do a full race distance when it comes to the 58 laps that we'll get on Sunday. But let's focus now on the on-track action that we've got as cars slowly start to pile out of the pit lane. Colapinto leading them, followed by Sergio Perez in that Cadillac. Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton is out there. The other Alpine of Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso, who didn't take part in free practice 1, is out the doors early in that Aston Martin. Let's see how much programme they can get through in this final practice session before we go qualifying later on this afternoon.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we've got a reduced session here, it won't run on. We won't get the full hour because we need to maintain the schedule to allow qualifying to happen. So if you were happy with your car yesterday, maybe you're okay. This is just about fine-tuning. If you had a difficult day yesterday, and there are some teams that really struggled more than others, if you made massive changes overnight, this session is even more crucial, where you need to validate those changes, you need to get more learning and understanding done. So there's going to be a mix of people that are either more happy or more displeased with the fact that we've got a reduced session here. But we have got 5 cars on track, a mixture of different tyres, of the softest 3 tyres in the range from Pirelli for this particular weekend, same as we had last year, and as Harry said, slightly different size, a little bit smaller, but a mix at the moment. We've got all 3 types on the circuit at the moment.
That's the voice of the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley up in the comments box alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. We've also got the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson with us, and down in pit lane, Jenny Gapp.
And Aston Martin's woes continue, I'm afraid. Lance Stroll is not in the car. In fact, it's got the orange markers all around the car, both in front of me and to the right-hand side. It says, caution, do not enter. ESS, restricted area, do not enter, in yellow, bright yellow, on top of the normal barriers that keep us away. And only the Honda engineers and mechanics are working on the car. It's stripped back entirely. The floor is... I think the floor's off, but it's hard to see from here. So he's not going to go out imminently anyway. When he does get out, I don't know. Remember, they are on very limited batteries. They only have 2 left in this country. They have no more to come to this country. So let's hope for their sake this isn't terminal.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. A tough weekend continues. Adrian Newey in the press conference yesterday, pretty upfront and honest about the goings-on down at Aston Martin. I think one of the biggest takeaways I had, Andrew, from that was the whole idea about, well, how can this have gone so wrong? Because Honda not too long ago were winning world championships in Formula 1 with Red Bull and powering them. But it turns out that Aston Martin were unaware that when they signed the deal with Honda, that all of those people have actually left the team.
Yes, gone to work on, as Adrian Newey put it, solar panels or something. Quote for the ages.
You love that quote, don't you?
Well, who doesn't? I think, interestingly, up and down the pit lane, there's a bit of chat about we're seeing Fernando Alonso locking up on the way into turn 3. He's managed to keep that under control. At least his car's going at the moment. There's been a bit of discussion about just how outspoken Adrian Newey has been. First of all, it's very out of character for him. He's always very cagey traditionally about giving away any technical information, and he's just sort of laid it all out and laid into Honda in many ways. And some people even saying it feels almost like they're trying to get Honda to break the contract and go away. Now, there's a load of things that need to be taken into consideration here. First thing is that here's some radio from Bortoleto.
And radio check.
Hello, radio's good.
Hello.
I guess we're going for the supposed comedy value on that one. There wasn't a lot of editorial merit in that, was there?
Thank you, Gabriel Bortoleto.
So the point is that.
I like it because normally it's all copy that, loud and clear, official jargon. Just a classic. Hello.
Well, Lando Norris once sung a song, didn't he, on his radio check, and now he gets sung it in his direction basically all times, and he massively regrets doing that radio check. So you've got to be careful.
I would. I think on an outlap to start a weekend. World champion Lando Norris now. That was it. That was his rookie year. How young he seemed at the time. All of these guys. George Russell, 8 seasons in Formula One. Same as Norris, same as Albon, all arriving at the same time. Feels like they're still so young, doesn't it? But experienced. They came in from F2 and sort of got on it pretty much straight away, especially Lando with McLaren. George coming through Williams, and he was competitive from the get-go.
Right, let's get a trackside view with Juan Pablo Montoya, who's watching on for us. 7-time Grand Prix winner. I believe he's at turn 9.
Hey guys, I'm on the entry of turn 9, and this is unbelievable. The cars look so fast going in. Something that is very different is how they have to look at that, how they need to blend the entries. It is very different because the lifts are a little early, but you don't look at them like they're braking, so they throw the car in. Look at that. Full speed is so good to see. It actually gets you really excited. I know the drivers don't love it and they can complain from what they were used to, but these cars are... Look at that. It's just out of words. It's so good. It's going to be exciting. I know the drivers actually complain about this zone, and I think it's not that bad because, remember, you used to have the DRS anyway, so you had a really high aero balance. Now the cars just feels a little lighter, but I don't think it'd be bad. And I always complain, you still got a pedal you can use.
Great place to watch Formula One cars in any era. Thank you, Juan Pablo, watching on for us at the high-speed chicane at 9 and 10, and that is a incredible change of direction, massive speed. If they do get rid of that part, they're going to be carrying the wing angle, more drag, that part of the circuit. It's going to deplete your energy even more.
Well, I don't see that they can do it. I was surprised when I first heard that was going to change this morning, just because of 2 counts. Firstly, they are already running out of energy. When we saw it very clearly yesterday, the Mercedes are pulling downshifts on their flying laps as Sainz trundles back.
That looks like a safe mode. Yeah, and he's made it to the entrance of the pit lane, brought out the yellow flag, and a few metres away from where he crashed out behind the safety car here last year. Real contrasting fortunes in recent years for Carlos Sainz. Crashed out behind the safety car last year. Year before, won the race brilliantly, recovering from appendicitis. But in 2026, the Williams team that had such high hopes and have got a car that has a lot of development work required, he's come to a halt and surely going to require an intervention beyond the yellow flag, given where he is on the circuit. 51 minutes to go, delayed session, and wonder if race control will take the opportunity to use a VSC to test it for the drivers. Let's listen in and see what we get.
Again, so he's lost power and then the car switched off. Now, there are a couple of ECU issues that arose yesterday. But in the Red Bull and the Racing Bull, we saw Verstappen and Lindblad trying to get out of the pits, and it cost them a little bit of time where the car basically just shut down from the control unit. I wonder if that's a similar thing there that Sainz has just had, or it's a Mercedes power unit issue separately to that. But it seemed a similar sort of thing. No drive and then just the ignition switching off.
Carlos Sainz remaining in the car. Yellow flag on the entrance to the pit lane. Still staying with this configuration at the moment. Not massively trying to change anything settings-wise on the steering wheel. This is why it's a peeling past. Tight in there, but it is possible. Oliver Bearman going by. Right, let's see what he's doing here. Replacing the steering wheel. So some sort of reset being attempted.
Well, just taking the steering wheel off and then putting it back on, but I think that was probably, he was about to get out of the car and then was told stay in, we might be able to reboot it.
Here's the virtual safety car that we were expecting rather quicker, so allows everyone else on the circuit to test that the system's working. Annoys Kimi Antonelli because he was on for the fastest time, Sector 1 and Sector 2. Reduces everyone's pace, and we'll see if Carlos now departs the car.
They lost time yesterday as well.
Yeah, but everything is turned off still.
Just sit tight unless someone come look at you on feedback.
Yeah.
It does look like a game over, but I'll let you know.
So a game over would suggest it's a power unit. They've got the data there, so they'll be able to see that at Williams, but they're obviously trying to, there's so many channels, they're trying to figure out exactly what has stopped it. Obviously when you just see the numbers flatline, you realise there's got to be some level of the source of that is going to be somewhere. But trying to then dive into all of those channels and figure out what it is. Is it a power unit issue? Is it a sensor issue that's spiked somewhere else on the car that's then turned off the power unit? Is it an ECU failure? That's interesting. So that is why Sainz was taking off the wheel and then putting it back on, because basically Gaetan, his race engineer there, was saying, until you have to get out of the car, stay in the car, because we might have a chance to fix it.
So they tried that. Sainz getting out of the car here. Wonder if he's going to do he replaces the steering wheel, which he has to as per the regulations. And it looked like he was waving away the marshals. I just wonder whether how he gets out of the car here. If he does a jump, he's slightly worried about does the complete safest way. There's an electrical issue with the car. You sometimes do the jump safe, don't make contact with any other part of the car, and that's why he was waving to the marshals there.
Yeah, so that again says it's a game over and a power unit issue then, and that's going to be a much bigger concern for Sainz and Williams, and he's looking a little bit in trouble right now. Missed a soft tyre run yesterday. Williams with issues on both cars, but Alex Albon pushing his Williams back in the morning run. They're not looking that quick, and they're not looking reliable. So Sainz, when you need to be out there learning the whole time, we're still under VSC.
The headrest is a bit loose on the right, it's not properly mounted in. Okay, happy.
So Alex Brundle will have that down as a major issue for Audi, but it's probably something that they can fix quite quickly if he can come in the pits.
Race ending, mate. Race ending. You won't want to be pounding around in the race with the headrest loose. I
Sorry, mate, I'm busy looking at the Williams that's parked up.
Also race ending. So what we're saying is it's as important as the power unit.
It very much feels like the start of term, especially with Alex Brundle and Jolyon Palmer in the commentary box. Lovely reception for Carlos Sainz, being cheered by this very, very knowledgeable, supportive crowd to all of the drivers in the field. 22 of them now. That virtual safety car inevitably has been upgraded to a red flag with the Williams mired at the end of the pit lane. They just took the opportunity, didn't they, to test the virtual safety car ahead of the first round of the season. Everyone forced as per the regulations. If you're one of our newer viewers, and there's quite a few of you, this is return to the pits as per the rule book. Fernando Alonso was out there, so he was hoping to get some mileage done. Everyone back to the pits, and the clock will continue to run.
Well, stop the clock now, because Fernando Alonso's in the top 6 in the Aston Martin. 6 laps on the board, 3.5 seconds away from Hamilton's early pace. and looking like a team in Formula One again at the start of play today. Stroll not out there. The team were checking something on his power unit, and they're piecing that back together and very late. So we know all of the issues now that Aston Martin have. The sound of a Honda engine in 2026. I imagine race control thought, because Sainz had pulled it over so close to the pit entry, that they'd just be able to push that back very quickly. But you can see no marshals are going near it, so not in a safe mode, which means you can't touch the car, which means it takes a long time to clear.
Yeah, good communication from Carlos as well to the marshals as well. So that was good stuff from him. As Fernando Alonso is back, and he was the champion when this man was born. Fernando Alonso has the longest ever Formula One career, and he will be hoping, even though they've got real problems down at Aston Martin and they might not be able to finish the Grand Prix, he will be hoping to start. He's 426th Formula One World Championship Grand Prix on Sunday. Everyone back to the pits. Gabriel Bortoleto will be the last one to peel into the pit lane, and on a day that promises so much, with final answers to the questions who's actually quick in Formula 1 2026, after all the pre-season testing, after Friday practice, we haven't had much to show you so far. As Carlos walks back to the Williams team, let's go downstairs to Ruth Busker.
Yep, down here in the pit lane, and we're used to seeing drivers drive past us in cars. Less so is when you have a driver that walks back. Now, it's not a great start to the session. Actually, you see team principal James Vowell is getting off the pit wall to make sure that when his driver Carlos gets back into the garage, he's ready to chat to him. Now, what does a power unit, seemingly a power unit issue like that, cause teams to do? Well, actually, it's more about the lack of running in terms of the lack of data. Every single team in the paddock is still trying to get their head around the optimization of these new regulations. And when you can't get the car back in the session, you lose your option to spend the next 43 minutes and 11 seconds collecting data. So they're going to have to rely on all of the data from the other side of the garage. As you see here, the first thing he's going to do is probably chat to his race engineer and explain to him how it felt in the car when it went on. This is the first indication that the race engineer, the power unit engineers are going to have of what went wrong. It's kind of like a diagnostic. You know, you go to the doctors, you explain how you feel with your symptoms. They're not actually going to be able to know exactly what went wrong until they get the car back. So they're going to combine driver feedback, what they saw on the telemetry with the car switched off, in terms of trying to get the parts ready that they might need to replace, or it might be as simple, but it's a case of trying to work it out. There is a really strict timer, so we have a fixed time between FP3 and qualifying. So it's not just data we're losing. If there is a problem, you can see here actually he does a great. I had a snap and then it just lost it. Kind of, he's quite a visual driver when it comes to explaining what goes on with the car. Him and Max have had that since their Toro Rosso days back in 2015. I think they might have learned it from the same race engineer. But yeah, it's going to be a tough one for the Williams garage, because depending on what went wrong, it could be as simple as a power cycle, which is our F1 term for turn it on and off again, or a full refit. Back to you, Jakesy.
Thank you, Ruth. Considerations for Williams, because of all the talk about Aston Martin, Jolien, in Bahrain and practice one. We had James Vowell on the show earlier on, but Williams are miles away from where the expectations were. It's almost been a reverse. 5th in the Constructors' Championship last year, podium finisher on 2 occasions with Carlos Sainz. They were expecting that to be something that they could talk about this year, and instead, early signs are that they're on the back foot.
Looks pretty bad, doesn't it? I mean, James was explaining to the guys earlier on that they're basically heavy, and they've got lots of work already in the pipeline to reduce the weight and add the downforce at the same time. But for a team that's got the Mercedes power unit, which we think is the class of the field, and have been preparing for this set of regulations for a long time. Carlos Sainz joined the team thinking that this was going to be his year to be back at the front with Williams. Yeah, he did a great job at the end of last year. That was a bonus. This was meant to be the year where Williams were back to being a front-running team genuinely, with a full refresh. It looks hard to explain, I think, for Williams. How they've managed to have so much resource and effort and time looking purely at this set of regs. And that was told to us very frequently last year that next year was the big year. And they've taken a huge step backwards, it seems. Let's wait and see where they end up in qualifying. But as I said, it's already going to be a tough job for Sainz now, regardless, because he's going to be missing out on lap time. The car's not reliable, and it's not very quick.
We are expecting the rate of development to be ferocious this year in Formula One. That's a saving grace for anyone who's had a really tricky start to the year.
Lando Norris is the longest serving McLaren driver in their history.
Yeah. But who's
that's crept up on me.
Who's the second longest serving?
I'm going to say it's Britain's very own David Coulthard.
Absolutely right. He joins us for qualifying in the Grand Prix. Palmer saw the segue coming. Nicely done. Yeah, Lando Norris with an incredible run. All with one team. All with the same team. Spoke about it on his final lap of the championship. He had offers to bail out when they were at the back. Did not do so. And reap the rewards. When they in the last couple of years, really at the end of that, and that's another sign, isn't it, for anyone who's had a tricky start. McLaren's journey from getting it completely wrong with the new regulations to being the dominant team by the end of the rule cycle shows that you can turn it round even if it is a tricky start.
Welcome back to Albert Park here in Melbourne as cars take to the track once again as FP3 is back underway after a short stoppage to get Carlos Sainz's Williams safely clear from its stopping point on the pit entry. And welcome back if you lost us for a few moments. Apologies, we're having a few technical issues here in Melbourne, but I think we should be all back to normal now as the cars line up at the end of the pit lane. It's Harry Benjamin up in commentary alongside me, the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, and the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, with Jenny Gow patrolling pit lane for us. It's 38 minutes and 15, 14, 13, 12 seconds remaining of this final practice session before we go qualifying later on today. And well, Mark, an unfortunate stoppage for the Williams of Carlos Sainz, but it's not the first time we've seen that happen, and it's something that could continue all the way through till Sunday's race day.
Yeah, exactly right. I think it could well be a feature of maybe not just this weekend, but certainly the early part of this season. So complex are these brand new cars and the systems that operate them. There's a huge amount for the teams to learn. They're still being tripped up by things that they haven't seen yet. Don't forget, we only had a handful of days of testing across 2 weeks in Bahrain, and that was running one car per team. So there's still loads of opportunities to find things for the very first time. And Carlos Sainz and Williams there seemingly coming across one of those gremlins, which it looks like has brought their session to an end. So this is a feature that's going to come up over the weekend. So as I said a moment ago, if you are going to get up with us and join us on Sunday morning to watch this race and to listen to us on 5 Live, I highly recommend you do, because it has the potential to be beautiful chaos, doesn't it?
Yeah, 4 o'clock in the morning on 5 Live for the first race of the season. By the way, lap times, just to bring up to speed with where the standing order is. Lewis Hamilton fastest with a 1:25.72. Hulkenberg in the Audi a second and a half back. Then it's Bortoleto, Gasly, Colapinto the top 5, with Alonso in 6th ahead of Sergio Perez. Norris, who's out there now, in 8th ahead of Ocon. Behrman the top 10 with Anthony, Leclerc and Russell 13th. Sainz didn't get a lap time in, and everybody else without any lap times to their name. So a good proportion of the field so far on the back foot. Right, let's check in and say good afternoon once again to Jenny Gow.
Good afternoon. Carlos Sainz has just stood to the right of me, about 3 metres away, with the number 55 emblazoned on his boots. His overall is around his waist. He's cross-armed, looking at the TV screen, trying to take some information from this session. His car was stranded out on track just at pit entry. They've now recovered that. But spoken to James Bowles, the team principal, and heard from him. They say it's something strange going on, because he ran out of power. So there was no power to the car, but they still had a radio. So that's slightly at odds with what usually happens. However, the team are confident that they've got Alex Albon going round. The cars were set up quite similarly, so they can do all the data gathering from Alex Albon and hopefully be in a good place when it comes to qualifying. But you have to question whether a lot of these teams are in a good place when it comes to qualifying, or if it's much a case of just cobbling it together and seeing what they can actually do?
I think it might be the case sometimes. I think we could get a bit of chaos when it comes to qualifying, and then certainly for Sunday's race day. It looks like one thing that looks fairly stable will be the weather conditions, at least. So no chaos caused by rain on and off like we had Sunday last year. So that might be some respite for the teams, but a lot of work being done down at Williams for Carlos Sainz side of the garage in particular. This is the sound of Kimi Antonelli on the start-finish straight, going fastest and really closing in on the back of the Ferrari ahead of him. Crosses the line to go quickest with a 1:20.324, 2.5 tenths clear of Lewis Hamilton. Then it's Max Verstappen in third, Leclerc and Piastri now the top 5, with Hadjar and Norris the top 7. Hulkenberg's on an outlap. Lawson slots up into 9th. Bortoletto rounds out the top 10.
Yeah, interesting with Antonelli. The two Mercedes definitely looked quick, and of course we're going to be moving into now the top 10 now all on the soft, faster tyre, which will be presumably the qualifying tyre of choice when it comes to the sessions that matter. So this is about learning how fast you can get your car to go over a single lap. And when we saw some of those runs yesterday, it seems incredibly close at the front. Ferrari looked very good over a single lap. The two Mercedes looked very quick, and the McLarens as well, with maybe Red Bull in that mix, particularly in the hands of Max Verstappen. We know you can never rule him out. So there's a huge amount riding on this session, and of course particularly the one that follows when it gets into qualifying, about how you can manage both your car, your energy deployment, keeping tyres alive over the course of a single lap. All of that stuff has got to be thrown into the mix and optimised when the session comes later on today. That's what the work is happening right now on track. That's what it's all about.
A couple of big lockups over the last few laps. Lewis Hamilton front right lockup, Valtteri Bottas both front wheels locked up, and it's in the same place that we're seeing time and time again the heaviest braking zone really on the circuit, turn 3, and those so slightly narrower tyres, less contact patch as well, faster speeds coming out of mid corners at least, so it all seems to be playing a part.
Yeah, and it's a bumpy sort of street track as well here at Albert Park, so it's not billiard table smooth. That sort of upsets the car when you're really heavily on the brakes. But also don't forget, we're throwing into the mix now a much heavier proportion of the braking being done electronically from the electric motors on the rear axle, which changes the balance, the braking phase of these cars. And because it's not consistent, because you're doing it at different rates at different times, that's something the drivers are having to continually adapt to going through the course of a lap and of course over a Grand Prix on Sunday. So some new things to get used to, both in terms of the technology but also how that technology is utilised and optimised in these brand new cars for 2026.
Charles Leclerc going quick in the Ferrari, fastest of anybody in sector 1, flicks himself out of turn 10, straight line mode activated all the way down to the 90-degree right-hander of turn number 11. Bit of traffic, gets out of the way with just 3 corners left, the first through turn 12. This is his teammate on the radio.
There's a blue light on my left. LED, I don't know what it is. It's really off-putting. Could be the toggle, could be. It's not the toggle.
So Lewis Hamilton being distracted by a blue light on his steering wheel on the left side of the LED display as his teammate Charles Leclerc crosses the line and goes fastest with a 1:22.71. So there's all sorts of numbers and toggles and sub-menus and lights to keep a track of at the best of times. When you suddenly see one that you don't recognise after a couple of weeks of testing, well, you kind of want to figure out what that is and quick.
Yeah, and you know, the teams have a number of things that they can display on their steering wheel. It's part of the dashboard, if you like, it's part of the steering wheel. They can display all sorts of things like the rev, the lights that you see often going up and down is related to the engine revs, but they can also have little lights that indicate which modes they're in. You used to get a little light that activated when you had DRS opened in the past, so there's all sorts of things, and they're configurable by the team. So as you say, so many new and complicated systems in place now. Some of this stuff, they will still be figuring things out for the very first time, even though we're now into a competitive race weekend.
Just hearing Oscar Piastri making his way towards turn 9 down Lakeside Drive, getting up to speed and then just topping out and starting to lift off, conserve the energy, rebuild and recharge the battery out of 10, gets a dose of it, then lifts off and coasts before the braking zone of the 90-degree right-hander of turn 11, getting back on it. A good example then of the various different methods deployed that the drivers are having to use to top up the battery and use that deployment in key areas to try and find the lap time across this 5.4 kilometre Albert Park circuit as Piastri crosses the line, fastest of anybody in the final sector, just under half a tenth away though from Charles Leclerc, pops himself up into second. Jenny.
Yeah, just down at Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso just about to come back in. No sign of movement for Lance Stroll's car, though. They're still working on it. They're still not saying exactly what's happened. The Honda engineers still poring over the data. So let's see. It doesn't look like they're going to get out. 30 minutes of the session left.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz out of this one, having found himself stopped on the pit lane entry, and Lance Stroll has not even left the garage. Least amount of laps completed by anybody at the moment is around about the 5-lap mark for the Cadillac of Valtteri Bottas. So too for the other Williams of Alex Albon. Andrew.
Also worth saying on the subject of Aston Martin that Fernando Alonso is going around, and okay, he's down in 17th place, but he's only 2.7 seconds off the pace today, so they've halved the gap to the front almost. In 24 hours, so big achievement from Aston Martin Honda there.
Yeah, I think we're very much quickly adjusting our level of achievements here, aren't we? But he's ahead of Colapinto and ahead of Sergio Perez and Bottas at the moment. The top 20 drivers who have all set any kind of lap time. 4.4 seconds covers the field right now, with Hamilton now fastest, less than half an hour to go for this final practice session. It is Hamilton, then Leclerc, the two Ferraris, 1 and 2, Piastri third, Antonelli, Verstappen the top 5, Bortoletto is sixth, Hadjar, Hulkenberg, Norris and Russell complete the top 10.
We're not seeing a very happy Max Verstappen or a Red Bull team. We're not seeing them set the world alight in terms of times. All of the top times have been traded between McLaren, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in the McLaren and the Mercedes as well. We haven't really seen Verstappen get in amongst that, not to the very top level. It's about 3/10 off the ultimate pace right now, and albeit that's swinging quite a lot as this practice session goes on as we edge towards qualifying. But I think actually it's fair to say over the weekend so far, we still haven't seen a Max Verstappen who looks like he's going to be the quickest of these cars. Maybe not far away, and maybe in the mix because we know what he can do, but certainly not at the moment looking like they're getting the best out of that package.
Around the final corner comes the sole remaining Williams of Alex Albon on the medium tyre. Thai driver finds a better time, pops himself up into 14th behind Ollie Behrman in the Haas. This is the sound of George Russell making his way out of turn 10, the man many have as favourites for the championship. A reprimand and a warning though already garnered by the Brit for his antics in practice yesterday, and a bit of contact with Arvid Lindblad in the pit lane, and it was deemed to be George Russell's fault, and a practice start outside the designated area earned him a warning as well. So certainly getting himself up into the steward's room early doors as he crosses the line and stays 11th.
Yeah, I think the weekend, I think we said this earlier on, but I think the weekend is going to be about how operationally smooth can you be. Can you get through cleanly without making mistakes? And that's everything from the operations of the drivers behind the wheel, but also from the team. Strategy is going to be an absolute nightmare this weekend. I would hate to be one of those people tasked with that job because there are so many variables and lots of them unknown at this point. No one knows what the pace of these cars is, the ultimate pace. You have to factor that into your strategic planning, not both with your car but also those of your competitors, and yet we don't have any real understanding or data around that. So strategy is going to be something that's a lot of playing it by ear this weekend, reactive strategy, as opposed to knowing exactly the optimum way to get through a Grand Prix.
Lap times improving from the midfield runners. Behrman's just got himself up into 10th. Arvid Lindblad, who has impressed so far in the two runnings of practice yesterday, the rookie on the grid, the British driver, up in 9th at the moment. I wonder if there's so much more obviously to do on the battery side of things, and we have had comments from Max Verstappen comparing these cars to like Formula E, the all-electric racing series being on steroids, but there is obviously a lot to be learned from that because that is a championship all about battery management, perhaps in a slightly different way. But Arvid Lindblad's manager, mentor, is a Formula E world champion in the form of Oliver Rowland. I wonder how much of a benefit that might be to him coming in as a rookie this year.
Well, I definitely think having someone who understands the challenge of this new technology will help. It may just help in the way that you can have conversations, you can start to bounce ideas and have chats around that with someone who knows what they're talking about, as opposed to someone who's so, inexperienced in that regard. I don't think you're going to find him coming in and sort of, steamrolling through the strategy department of the team. But it's got to be helpful. As a driver, your manager and the small team of people you have around you are really influential in your mentality, in your sort of demeanour, the way that you feel over a race weekend. Those are the conversations you're having more than any other. So to have someone who's just at least on the ball and understands what you're going through, I think has to be a help.
And of course, Arvid Lindblad. Technically, Andrew, you'll know this. Is he the last junior to have been brought into Formula One by Dr. Helmut Marko now that he's gone as Red Bull's motorsport consultant?
He will be, absolutely, yes. Marko picked up Lindblad when he was 13 as a karter. Sort of brought him through the Red Bull program pretty quickly. He's only 18, fourth youngest Formula One driver ever, youngest British Formula One driver ever. Charles Leclerc goes fastest by over 3/10 from Oscar Piastri's McLaren. So it's obviously quite a change for Red Bull. Marko has been in charge of that program for so long, and he's not only mentored the junior drivers, but he's also mentored the drivers in Formula One, particularly the ones below the main Red Bull team. So I actually asked Lindblad about that when I interviewed him in Bahrain a couple of weeks ago, and he admitted it was going to be slightly strange to not have Helmut Marko around.
No, departed the team at the end of last year. Just listening and getting a replay of a very slow-moving Williams that's following an equally slow car ahead of it. And doesn't look good, does it? And comes to an absolute stop. That's on the exit of turn 4 before you approach the right-hander of 5. The Alpine of Gasly goes through, but then actually Albon picks up the pace again and gets going.
There's a quirk with these new cars that is perhaps something that still needs to be ironed out. We saw it happen yesterday to Max Verstappen. We saw, I think, George Russell suffered with it as well. Part of the sort of technical management, the onboard systems that control a lot of this complex software running the energy management, can sort of trip into a sort of default mode when your battery pack hits the rock bottom, when you completely empty it. And I think what happens is it goes for a set period of time where it effectively ramps you down to 0.
It's a whole minute, and I think it's one of the many things that teams up and down the pit lane are saying, why do we have these complications? Why do you need to go into a limp mode for 60 seconds if your battery drains? Why, for example, can you not recover energy at the full possibility of energy recovery at certain points, and only at 250 kilowatts, not 350? What is the point of all this added layers of complication?
And I think some of those things are things to give, I guess, some credit to the rule makers. They will need to figure this stuff out. And I think as long as they are adaptable, as long as they're open to making changes in the right way with the consultation of the teams, I think that's okay. But I think the irony about that particular one where it trips down to 0 electrical power for 60 seconds, it's in there as a safety feature, and yet ironically it becomes one of the most unsafe features you can have because your car's crawling around a racetrack.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that was most annoying for the teams about this change to the straight line mode that happened this morning and then the U-turn, was that they'd all agreed before coming here that a number of things needed to be looked at and possibly considered for rule changes in the future, and in the quite immediate future. And one of them was that one where, Harry, you were talking earlier about recovering energy at full throttle. That's what I meant by, at the moment, that's limited to 250 kilowatts. And there's quite a lot of pressure from people like Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, who we heard from earlier, to make that 350. Well, why can't it be 350? And there was no obvious reason, and a lot of the teams are saying, why didn't Nicholas Tombazis, the FIA F1 director, why didn't he listen to us when we were talking about this? Because that's one of the things that's stopping them recovering all the energy they need. That's one of the topics of discussion that's on the table. So, but the agreement was, we'll look at it after 2 or 3 races and then decide what the right things to do are. So there's a spread of circuits from here to China to Japan. So when Tombazis unilaterally, without discussion with the teams, made a rule change overnight from Friday to Saturday at the first race, the teams were all going, but we discussed that we weren't going to make rule changes, so why have you just gone and done it?
Well, I'm sure things will be ironed out and continue to be talked about throughout the first few races of this season. 20 minutes and 43 seconds remain of this final practice session. Leclerc quickest with a 1:19.827, 3/10 clear of Piastri. Then it's Hamilton, Antonelli and Max Verstappen, the top 5. Jenny, I believe you've got an update on Aston Martin for us.
I do. So Lance Stroll is not going to take part in this session, as we probably predicted. And I asked the team what's going on. It's a power unit issue, but I wanted more details. So I went back and asked them, is it ICE, as in the actual... oh my goodness
internal
me.
combustion engine.
Thank you. Always there to help me out. Thank you very much. Or was it a battery, which I think would be more of a concern, and this time is the ICE. So that's what's up, and he's not going to take any more part in this session. I'm just down here actually bringing the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli, and they're just about to bring in one of the McLarens as well. So it's about to be a little bit busy here.
Thanks, Jen. Work continuing to be done then, and they'll focus on trying to get Stroll out for some kind of qualifying run later on this afternoon.
I was just going to make a reference to the lap we saw a few moments ago from Charles Leclerc, which is the table-topping lap at the moment. It's a 1:19.8, which I think I'm right in saying is the fastest lap of the weekend so far. But he made quite a large correction in the penultimate corner, so there was still quite a bit more time on the table. That Ferrari over a single lap, I think, is incredibly quick. That's a lap time that's around 3.5 seconds quicker than his teammate, half a second quicker than Antonelli and the Mercedes. So a chunk better than anyone else right now. I totally take the caveat that these are swinging and developing and changing all of the time. But I think Ferrari are in with a very, very good shout when it comes to qualifying. If we look at the pace from yesterday, as I think Andrew mentioned earlier on, when it comes to race pace, looking after the tyres, running over longer stints, that looks like it maybe favours more the Mercedes right now. But over a single lap, definitely don't rule out Ferrari.
What about Ferrari power too? We're getting a look at Ollie Behrman down in 12th at the moment. Teammate Esteban Ocon down in 15th. We expect them to be in that fight in the midfield with the likes of Racing Bulls and Alpine as Behrman peels in to the pit lane. A potential future Ferrari driver in the making. An impressive year last year, outpaced teammate Esteban Ocon and won the qualifying head-to-head last year as well. But he is right on the fringes actually still of a race ban, because he's got 10 penalty points to his name. If he notches up 2 more, he'll get a race ban.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a great way to start the season, would it? So he's got to keep his nose clean for a couple of races. I think that's until about mid-May, is it?
Yeah, something around then.
Drop off. So, yeah, he's got to be a little bit careful. There have been a couple of tweaks from the stewards talking about how penalty points will be distributed this year, so a little bit more leniency in some of those areas. So maybe that'll help him, but he's got to keep his nose clean. But I think, that's what we can say about him. He's settled in, as you rightly say, settled into being a Formula 1 driver in a very mature way. I think he's a real bright talent, and I'm sure at some point we'll end up in that main Ferrari car again.
Piastri's just stopped by Jenny Gow.
He has, luckily. They're just putting some boards underneath him and the trolleys and pushing him back into his garage. Didn't actually do a practice pit stop, which I thought they would, but no, they're just putting him back into the garage with Zach Brown and Andrea Stella just on the pit wall watching on. What I find interesting about Oscar Piastri this year, sporting the number 81 of his via McLaren, is that I think Mark Webber, who is his manager and was at almost every race last year, is taking a little bit of a step back from managing Oscar Piastri and being on site. So won't be a presence as much as he was. And I'm just interested by that and intrigued, because last year obviously he was going great guns and then it wasn't, and then it definitely didn't right towards the end. So yeah, tweaks for Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, Mark Webber not being at as many races, is that something notable, or is that part of a streamlining process, or is he just back at home making sure he sends off Piastri's invoices?
Yeah, I don't know about that part of it, but I mean, look, the role of a manager, as we discussed earlier on, can be pretty pivotal, particularly to a young driver. And Oscar Piastri was relatively new still to his McLaren journey. He was entering a title fight for the very first time really last year. He is now, of course, gaining more experience. He knows how to manage himself through a race weekend in many regards. So maybe he doesn't have the same requirements on a personal level. I mean, I have no idea of the actual details as to why that's happening. Maybe Mark Webber just wants to spend a bit more time at home. I have no idea. But it can be major, or it can be a little bit more minor depending on the relationship they have, and of course what Oscar needs out of this. He will want to surround himself by the right people, but that includes not just his manager, but people like his trainer, his performance engineers, and all of the people that come to races with him. His entourage, if you like, can play a pivotal role and maybe pick up some of the bits that Mark Webber might leave by not being there.
15 minutes, 30, 29, 28, 27 seconds remain of this final practice session. Leclerc quickest with a 1:19.827, 3/10 ahead of Piastri. Then it's Hamilton, Antonelli and Verstappen the top 5. Bortoletto is 6th for Audi ahead of Hadjar in the Red Bull. Lawson's Racing Bulls is 8th. Norris in the McLaren is 9th, with Hulkenberg's Audi rounding out the top 10. Lindblad is 11th ahead of Behrman, Russell, Albon and Ocon the top 15. Gasly's down in 16th ahead of Fernando Alonso in 17th. Colapinto 18th. Then it's the two Cadillacs 19th and 20th, with Sainz having been out for a lap and then stopping on the pit lane entry, having to abandon ship, down in 21st, and Lance Stroll not able to get out of the garage for this session with work to his power unit being done. You mentioned there are some penalty changes. Might be worth picking up on those, by the way, that the FIA have announced ahead of this weekend, as Nico Hulkenberg gets a little bit squirrely on the exit of turn 11. Manages to gather it all back up in his Audi. Penalty points, you picked up on that, Mark. They will not be imposed for anything other than dangerous, reckless or apparently deliberate actions resulting in a collision or other unsportsmanlike or unacceptable behaviour. Where an incident stems from an attempt to avoid a collision, more leniency will be shown. A temporary loss of control or a lock-up may be due to the laws of physics, and it will be recognised that in an overtake, even when a car has gained the right to the corner, the other car cannot simply disappear. What do you make of these, Andrew?
So fundamentally, the drivers have won that battle, up to a point anyway. These are a lot of the things that they were talking about last year. To take, for example, the incident with Antonelli and Piastri and Leclerc in Brazil. Piastri was penalised for that incident, and most of the drivers thought it was wrong to penalise him for that thing where you're talking about the driver on the inside not being able to disappear, the driver being able to make the move and so on, being taken into account. Those are all points the drivers were making. I can tell you, however, that there is still some displeasure among the drivers, among the GPDA, I should say, which is representing all the drivers, about certain aspects of these new guidelines that have come out overnight. And one of those is the fact that there's in the sort of small print, there's talk about how much drivers should slow down for yellow flags and double waved yellow flags, and they've given a percentage, 5% they've said, that will be considered among the criteria that they'll judge slowing down for a single yellow flag, and I think it's 10%.
Oh, sorry, Andrew. Antonelli in the wall with a big crash. He's moving steering wheel out as he gets himself out of the car. But as we were listening to Mercedes George Russell make his way around on the lap, Kimi Antonelli has destroyed his Mercedes, the rear and the front ends around the lap. But he said he's okay on the radio, and it's in the first part of the lap as well for Kimi Antonelli. Literally just starting laps. He's made it through the first couple of corners and then had a big collision there with just 12 minutes left on the clock of this final practice session.
Yeah, that's a total nightmare for those at Mercedes. We're going to get a replay of it now. Coming down, you're listening to Kimi Antonelli coming down the start-finish straight, onto the brakes and into turn 1. Just about clips the apex and over the curb, over the exit curb. It looked like he unsettled the car. I can only assume it's not a particularly brutal curb there, but it looked like it unsettled the car, almost beached out on the curb, spun him round. Yeah, I
think he's just gone back on the power probably a bit too early, I'm guessing, because one of the things about these new cars, I don't know until we hear from Antonelli later, but one of the things about these cars is that with the increased power from the electrical part of the engine, there's a lot, the drivers have been saying the acceleration out of corners is absolutely incredible. We're looking at it again, Mark, here. He is on the curb, but he also comes back on the power at that point, so we'll have to wait and see what he says. But it's one thing to bear in mind in this incident. They get a lot of immediate, instant torque from the electrical part of the engine, and it's 350 kilowatts, it's nearly 500 horsepower. So the drivers do have to be careful about that. Even Formula 1 drivers have been shocked by the instancy of the acceleration, so that may be a factor involved here.
The upshot of this, of course, is that we're rapidly approaching qualifying, and there's a huge amount of work for this Mercedes crew now to try and do something about that car. The back end is utterly destroyed. The front end has major damage to suspension. These are all brand new components. They may not have the full quantity of spares at this early stage of the season that you might like to be able to stockpile as the season goes on.
The other thing to bear in mind is that Antonelli was almost certainly out running his qualifying simulation lap, which everybody else will have been wanting to do at the same time. And now we've had a big crash. There's only 10 minutes left. It's going to take a while to clear that car. I don't know whether anyone's going to get a qualifying simulation run in here.
Fantastic.
No, I can't see that happening. Even more unknowns as the marshals head to the track and start trying to sweep away all the bits of debris off a really badly damaged Mercedes. Jenny, I think you're outside the Mercedes garage now. What can you tell us?
Yes, I am. Toto Wolff is just at the back of the garage, and I think he's replaying the incident again and again in his mind, if not on the screens. Not what you want to see your junior driver going out there and doing, and this is going to be painful for the team. On the left-hand side, it's the number 12 of Kimi Antonelli of Mercedes, and they're just sticking his decal on the floor in the garage, and now they've got all the time in the world to do it because that car is coming back in bits. And as you say, a lot of the mechanics standing around just looking at the damage on the TV screens and thinking, okay, what can we do with this? What have we got? What can we do when it comes to qualifying? Is he actually going to be able to qualify for this race? Tense times for Mercedes.
The other part of this, Jenny, and everybody, is that because this is so early in the season, with such brand new technology, as we keep saying, new cars, there's an unfamiliarity still at this point from the engineers and from the mechanics about how long does the process take to rebuild a car like this. What happens is, as you go through a season, you get very accurate about predicting how long it takes to change a gearbox, how long does it take to change the floor in a car. You can know down to the minute, so you can plan exactly what you're capable of achieving within a certain time frame. Right now, a lot of that's still unknown. They may not have the right numbers of sub-assemblies pre-built up in the back of the garage. There's a huge amount of work to do here, and this is going to be a major challenge. Pretty sure no one at Mercedes is getting lunch today.
Well, I was going to ask, you're the mechanic in the garage, Mark, and you've just seen that. Are you sort of grimacing now that you know your driver's okay, but now you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get my lunch break?
I'm desperately now running to the fridge to grab a sandwich because it might be the only opportunity you get. And then you're running through, you know, each of these mechanics have a particular speciality, so they've got a part of the car that they're responsible for. So, you know, there'll be the guy that's responsible for the front end. He's already running through in his mind exactly what he's got pre-built. Has he got sub-assemblies of things like wishbones and uprights? He's wondering where they are. He's speaking to the spares guy who's running around frantically trying to salvage what he can out of the sort of stockpiles at the back of the garage and prepare as many of these components as they can, because this is going to be all hands on deck. And that's assuming, by the way, that it is just the extremities that need replacing. If there's anything like chassis damage, and this was a substantial impact, so it could be, well, then you might as well write off qualifying, because there's no way you're getting into that before the qualifying session start in a few hours' time.
Well, Kimi Antonelli has made it back to the Mercedes garage, and Jenny's got eyes on him.
Yeah, firmly with his helmet on. They always keep their helmets on when they're working down the pit lane because they don't want us to doorstep them and ask them questions. But he's still got his helmet on, even in the garage, and it's just next to his race engineer, Pete Bonington, of course, a name that we know so well because he used to be the race engineer for Lewis Hamilton. And he has a very good relationship, actually, the two of them, between Kimi and Pete Bonington. Very different from him and Lewis, but he really takes them under his wing, and they're just looking back. They have files on their computers on the screen, and they can play back everything that's just happened. They can take parts of the imagery, all sorts of things. It's very clever, and right now they're just re-watching that crash and probably analysing exactly what happened, what the driver felt, what they were seeing on the data screens. And as you say, there's a flurry of action going on. They've got the big tarpaulin ready to put on that Mercedes as soon as it comes back, and the rebuild will get underway as soon as they can.
Where marshals all over the track on the exit of turn 2 right now with the big sweepers trying to clear it all. They've taken the car away, the big bits of debris. The rear wing lies on its own, and next to it the front wing in absolute bits on the grass either side, and maybe a few bits of memorabilia that some of the marshals might be able to pocket and take home with them.
I mean, that happens, I can assure you. But one thing I would say is it doesn't look to be major damage to the sort of walls or the barriers, certainly from what we can see. The reason for the stoppage at the beginning of the session was from a crash in one of the support races, and it really did almost destroy the sort of Tech Pro barriers. Well, this has hit more of a concrete wall section, hence the major damage to the car. But consequently it hasn't really damaged the structure of the wall itself. So once they've cleared the debris, we might, with 5.5 or so minutes left on the clock, just get one final run for everybody before the checkered flag comes out.
5 minutes and 44, 43, 42 seconds. Might get maybe 1-2 runs, an absolute push. The exit still closed, but it will be tight. The lap times are Leclerc quickest with a 1:19.827 on the soft tyre. Piastri 3 tenths back. Hamilton the top 3, but we are hearing cars fire up. Session will be resumed in a couple of minutes' time as the Racing Bulls makes its way out into the sunshine of the pit lane, and it's a flurry of action, Jenny.
Yeah, it really is. The McLarens are out, and I think it's Lando Norris that leads the queue on a brand new set of these soft tyres. In fact, everyone up and down the grid is on the newest set of soft tyres they can possibly have. Some who were underway before have to have a little bit of a... so they've got the same soft tyres that they were on the run-on before, but they're all waiting to go out. They know Trimon's pressured, and just looking down, Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull is desperately trying to get into the fast lane. He can't, and Max Verstappen has also got caught out a little bit as well. This is going to be a big race to the exit.
It's also going to be a really interesting sort of precursor to qualifying, and we're going to find in qualifying later on today that it gets very, very busy, even more than this perhaps in the first part, because of course here we are missing a couple of cars through sort of failures and damage and unreliability. But in qualifying, potentially we might have 22 cars on the circuit at the same time, all vying for position, desperately trying to find that gap that they require to get the clean lap. And I was talking to a lot of people in the paddock today that said, actually maybe, although that's the normal protocol, you desperately need to optimise your gaps on the circuit, maybe today that doesn't matter anywhere near as much. Just getting even an early banker lap in could be so valuable that it might actually catapult you some way up the grid just through doing that.
Green light on at the end of the pit lane. Lando Norris leads them out, followed by the sole remaining Mercedes of George Russell, and then the rest of them in what is the most expensive queue of traffic I think you'll see in the world, with 3.5 minutes just over that to get them out on board. And Red Bull, I think, might be a bit on the back foot here. Isaac Hadjar has eked forward, so too Max Verstappen, but they have not got their car in the fast lane, or more importantly, they've not got their tyre on the white line. But Hadjar moved forward, then very quickly as the number one mechanic there put his hand down on the sideboard just to stop him, because he didn't have right of way. And then there was a gap with enough time and enough space to let Hadjar through. So unlike yesterday where we saw contact between Russell and Lindblad, the Red Bull does find a gap in the end.
Yeah, what happened there was that Max Verstappen was trying to come out as well, just behind Hadjar, and Fernando Alonso, who is Max Verstappen's friend, they've got a lot of mutual respect there. He stopped and allowed Verstappen out, and that allowed Hadjar to get out just in front of him.
Good off Fernando Alonso, always thinking about others, even though when he's got his own problems to deal with. So everyone then making it out of the pit lane unscathed, and we should get some, quick flying laps towards the end of this, and maybe an insight into what's going to happen in a few hours' time when we go qualifying for the first time in 2026. Let's follow Lando Norris. He's just crossed the line and heading down towards turn 1 now. Chucks it through into the right-hander, immediately sweeps to the left-hand side before it's the first short blast down towards the heaviest braking zone on the track. This is where you get a chance to recover a lot of energy under braking before you turn it into the right-hander. Sweep the car over, back from the left to the right-hand side, through another left-hander of 4, the fast sweeper of 5. Then it's another short blast down to the newly renamed In Her Corner after Laura Muller and Hannah Schmitz for International Women's Day, the right-hander of 6. And now he heads down Lakeside Drive, where we will see and hear, if we're lucky, a little bit of lifting, a little bit of super clipping, running at full throttle, but part deploying and part harvesting at the same time. And then before you know it, you're back on the power, flicking through 9, flicking through 10, using that energy you've harvested, deploying a bit of boost before you head down to another major braking zone, the right-hander of turn 11.
Yeah, so two of the cars that we expect to be right at the front of the field, the McLarens and the Mercedes, are going kind of head-to-head here, flat out on this final lap before the checkered flag. And at the moment, about halfway round the lap, it is George Russell significantly faster than Lando Norris's McLaren. Wasn't so good in the first sector, but took so much time out of the McLaren in the middle sector. I think he's going to find himself ahead. Lando Norris now completing the lap, and he will go up to fifth position. Fifth position for Norris. George Russell all the way up to the top with a 19.0. Once again now the fastest time of the weekend so far.
By 0.7 of a second. Huge. Over Leclerc. Goodness me.
And it was all about that middle sector.
Yeah, and what was the gap I said earlier on the race run yesterday? 6 tenths.
About 6 tenths, yeah. Well, we started to see then that Mercedes and its dominance and power come to the fore. And just over 20 seconds remain. Just
to back that up, Piastri in the second, McLaren now doing his run, coming towards the second, the closing part of his lap. He's around 8 tenths off George Russell, so they just haven't got a response at this point in the afternoon to match that Mercedes.
Russell currently top. We're seeing the Audi of Gabriel Bortoleto come across the line, gets himself up into 7th. Audi looking like they are possibly in the mix for Q3 later on this afternoon, and points in that midfield pack. Piastri is the first to take the checkered flag, crosses the line in 3rd, next to the sounds of the rookie Arvid Lindblad, down in 13th at the moment as he slows it all down for the penultimate corner, not finding a huge amount of lap time here. Hadjar and Verstappen both out there as well. Verstappen going okay in the first sector. Hadjar slightly behind him. We'll see what they've got in a couple of quarters' time.
Well, it's an interesting display of the differences in these cars, because if you just compare Verstappen's Red Bull to George Russell's Mercedes, Verstappen much quicker in the first part of the lap, much slower in that middle part. So they're delivering performance at different parts of the circuit, and Hadjar slots into P5. Verstappen now crosses the line to go behind his teammate in P6.
Both a second behind George Russell, who has 6 tenths advantage over the next runner, which is Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, a 10th ahead of his teammate Charles Leclerc. Oscar Piastri 4th, Hadjar 5th, Verstappen 6th. The Williams of Alex Albon struggling with an overweight car, crosses the line down in 17th. Checkered flag is out for this final practice session. Last hard pushes then for some qualifying data ahead of that all-important power hour later on, and you can hear it in full right here on BBC Radio 5 Live, kicking off at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it will be well worth getting up early, I think, for the first qualifying of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. This has made me even more excited. Yes, we've got one of the cars in George Russell considerably faster than everybody else right now, but don't be put off by those gaps. We've got a 6th, 10th gap from Russell to the second place Hamilton. Even to get down to P4, it's a second difference, but don't let that fool you. I don't think that is the genuine pace order. This is going to swing, ebb and flow as the weekend goes on. I think teams are going to be shuffled, drivers within teams are going to be shuffled. I think it's so unpredictable. There's everything still to play for.
And like we've had time and time before, different tracks will suit different cars. Yeah. Their characteristics will have strengths at either or. It's not just about energy management. It will be about the chassis design. It will be how good they are on tyre degradation as well. And like we see at the start of every regulation cycle, the gaps are big, but they come down very quickly. Formula One is the fastest development race in the world. Yeah. And we're only just at the start of something brand new here.
Yeah, exactly right. I think there's so many unknowns. You know, whatever order we get from qualifying later on, we've still got the race start, which is going to be unpredictable. We've seen so many variations of race starts in the testing sessions. This will be the first real competitive one when we get to Sunday here in Melbourne. The race start is going to be one thing, and then we've got race strategy and tyre management, as well as all of the energy management. So many unpredictable unknowns for every single team on this grid. Anyone who thinks they have got this sussed and figured out the order and the way this race is going to go, I'm sorry, but you're making it up.
Let's check in with Jenny before we complete practice. Jen, thoughts from that session?
Well, difficult sessions for Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll. They didn't get much running in, if any. And then Kimi Antonelli with that big crash. Mercedes have a lot to do in the next couple of hours to get that car back and ready for qualifying if they can.
Yeah, they certainly do. Mark, pick for pole.
I mean, you know, to look beyond George Russell right now seems crazy, doesn't it? But like I say, I think a lot can happen, even in the space of a couple of hours, and getting your session right in qualifying is key here. Get it the tiniest bit wrong, get it compromised by even the smallest amount. I think that can cost you quite a few good spots. Well,
look, the final practice session has completed. George Russell, quickest. Lewis Hamilton second ahead of Charles Leclerc. Piastri fourth, Hadjar fifth. Verstappen, Antonelli, Lando Norris, Bortoleto and Ollie Behrman the top 10. Lindblad 11th ahead of Liam Lawson. Esteban Ocon 13th with Nico Hülkenberg and Pierre Gasly the top 15. Then Franco Colapinto in 16th ahead of Alex Albon. Fernando Alonso down in 18th with some good running for the Aston Martin, who are very much on an uphill battle. Bottas and Perez, the two Cadillac drivers, down in 90th and 20th. Carlos Sainz with issues in that session, only getting one lap on the board, and Lance Stroll did not make it out of the garage. We hope to see him in qualifying later on today, and it is one to be getting up for right here on 5 Live, 5 o'clock in the morning. Do join us for it. My thanks to Jenny Gow, to Andrew Benson, to Mark Priestley. We shall see you for qualifying. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.